because I've got a few more questions I want to ask you, but I want to go to Craig Shannon now. Craig Shannon is the CEO of Clubs ACT, just to get his thoughts on what this research might tell us or might not tell us. Craig Shannon, good to have you on the show as always.
Thanks, Ross.
So basically, this ANU research has shown that despite reducing the pokie numbers from 5,022 in 2015, now down to, what are we down to, 3,600 or less in some, that there's been no reduction in the amount of money lost. Does that make sense to you?
Oh, look, the report doesn't make sense to me at all, Ross. And just having a quick appraisal of it, it hasn't even included CPI figures into those assessments. So if you actually look at the figures from 2015 and add CPI and compare it to June 2024, you're basically looking at a $39 million loss, not a profiting. So, I question the validity of the report.
So you reckon spending has dropped by 39 mil since 2015?
Just comparing currency in 2015 to 2024 with CPI, you'd have to say that's what the economic figures suggest. So I don't know what the basis of this report is, and I find it quite cynical that it's been dropped 2 weeks out from an ACT election, largely for what seems to be promotional purposes. We got no consultation in regards to this report at all from the ANU. They seem to do these things in a bubble. I don't know if it reflects the quality of the research that's going on there at the moment, but I'd suggest it might.
So they didn't make contact with you to get access to these figures at all?
No, and that's the problem with a lot of these research papers that come out. They're basically done in a vacuum, and they don't seem to engage with the marketplace that's got lived experience in these areas, either technically or otherwise. And I'm just unsure as to how they could have come up with these figures based off not including CPI in them.
So would you say then, Craig Shannon, that reducing the pokie numbers in the ACT is actually working? Do you think it is actually stopping the amount of people who are losing money?
I think there's been a bit of movement that could have been made in that area that's probably been successful. But at the end of the day, prohibition model in of itself is not a solution to this issue. And the reduction of machines down to a point that they're basically a prohibition framework for them, that's all that's going to do is drive the expansion of online gambling, which is already happening, or force people who are problem gamblers over the border into New South Wales. So it's counterintuitive. Health advocates apply one standard to poker machines and a completely different one to meth and illicit drugs and alcohol and everything else. It beggars belief in an educated community with the highest per capita income in Australia.
As Kate Cecilja pointed out, though, we do have the highest per capita income in Australia, but we also lose more money per capita than any other jurisdiction in Australia.
Well, I'm not aware of those figures if that's the case, and I'd certainly be keen to sit down and go through that detail. But maybe if people can afford in this jurisdiction to lose more money on entertainment than other jurisdictions, well, that would probably be consistent with the per capita income of the community. I mean, we have an educated community in this town, Ross. We don't need to hold people's hands and tell them how they should enjoy their life or their freedom to spend their money that they can afford to spend.
No, and I don't think anybody wants a nanny state where we are told what we can and can't do. But don't we also...
That's what the debate sort of drives, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but don't we, Craig Shannon, also have a responsibility as an educated community to make sure that we protect the people who do get caught up, who do become addicted, whose lives are turned upside down, whose family lives are turned upside down?
Absolutely. And Canberra has one of the best stories to tell in any jurisdiction in the country for our efforts in harm minimisation. There's no other community in Australia that's reduced poker machines in the population by 30% since 2015. We've done that. We've got some very good narratives, even the government's own assessments in terms of the number of people in this community who exhibit gambling harm by definition is very small as proportion of the community. We've got some really good narratives to tell, but there's a certain group of individuals and researchers who like to run around and catastrophize things all the time so you don't get a chance to hear the positive stories. And our industry is very mature and is very committed to the harm prevention systems that are available to assist our patrons and our visitors in the clubs. We work closely with the government and the industry broadly.
What I don't understand, I'm sure you'll be able to explain this to me, Craig Shannon. To the best of my knowledge, I rarely see people queuing up to use a poker machine. It's not as if we don't have enough poker machines to cover the number of people in Canberra who like to have a flutter. Why would reducing the number of poker machines actually reduce the amount of money spent on it? It's not as if people are going to go, oh, there's too long a queue tonight, I'm not going to go and do it.
Well, you could sort of argue the point to some extent with beers of choice. At the end of the day, poker machines, and a lot of people don't realise this who don't play poker machines, there's any number of systems involved different sorts of games. A lot of players have their own preferences. That's why you don't tend to get people queuing like you're talking about. Certain people play different types of machines. Certain venues have different models of machines, or there's particular popular brands or otherwise. It's a market of choice, and people exercise that choice across the ACT. And, you know, I don't know if it would be a good thing by reverse of suggesting that there should be queues of people at these machines. Is that the objective of the argument now, that we reduce machine numbers down to the point that we've got people queuing to use them?
No, I don't think so. But what I'm wondering is, if you draw the logic here, if you're saying, okay, if we reduce the number of poker machines, it's going to reduce the opportunities for people to gamble. But that only works if suddenly people cannot, you know, if they go in and there are too many people waiting to use poker machines. It doesn't work if there are still enough poker machines to fill the appetite of the punters.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the venues are offering a series of choices in machine types and numbers that are used by different people at different times. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not quite sure of the basis of the argument in this area. I mean, the industry has participated in a number of areas in trading off machine licenses in a voluntary basis. That's how we've reduced the machine numbers down by 30%. But what are we talking about here? We're talking about actually pursuing a prohibition model, so there should be no machines around venues, and that the people with problems should be crossing the border or hopping into online wagering, which is a substantially worse problem for the community. I don't understand what the narrative is that's being promoted here. We've got an industry that's very mature, that works closely with government on harm minimisation frameworks, and at the end of the day, you know, I think the Canberra community is much better off for that.
Craig Shannon, good chatting with you as always. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Ross. Lovely.
Craig Shannon, who's the CEO of Clubs ACT. Very interested to get your thoughts on that this afternoon, folks. You've heard Craig Shannon's arguments for this. 1300 681 666